Good evening and welcome to our final overview session that is going to be for this semester for capstone. And today what we are going to be going over is some guidelines and some guidance on your final presentation. We are calling this the Science and the Art of Powerful Presentations, Cutting Edge Secrets of TED, Steve Jobs, and Presentation Zen. John Sweller of the University of New South Wales once said, "The use of PowerPoint presentations has been a disaster and should be ditched." And how many times have you sat through really terrible PowerPoint presentations? So we're going to talk about how to do them better. This is an example of an awful slide. It has too much on it. I will let you look at this later because there's too much to go over, but you can see a couple of things like small fonts, colors that don't have enough contrast, so much information on your slide that you're tempted to read it. Cutesy clip art that's cheesy. And really busy slides, charts, and tables that are too hard to read. An animation that is slow. And graphics that are fuzzy, stretched, or squishy. So what is it that we're going to be covering in this presentation? We've already kind of talked about the why. The why is because we want you to give a powerful presentation. We don't want you to give a boring one, but we're also going to talk about the why of this particular presentation that you will be giving. Why are you doing it? Then we're going to make some suggestions on what kinds of things you ought to cover and how you can do that with some of the tools in PowerPoint. And then what else might be interesting to discuss there, and who has done this? Who has done this in the past? What are some examples of what they've done? So what is the purpose of this presentation? You should plan to give this presentation as though you were giving it to a conference that is interested in your topic, and you're going to give it like a TED Talk. So it's going to be exciting, energized, and compelling. You should try to make it so that it is not longer than 20 minutes. Now, for those of you who have 3 or 4 people in your team, maybe that's a little bit too short, but try to keep it certainly absolutely no longer than 30 minutes. And then we're going to allow about 10 minutes of Q&A. As I think I mentioned before when I was getting you to sign up for the presentation time on Friday the 29th, we're going to go from one to the next to the next. So there's not going to be a time certain. So if somebody does it for 20 minutes and you don't have 10 minutes of Q&A and we don't need to take a short break, then we're going to go right on to the next one. And we'll get done earlier. So let's talk about what to say. Do not give a book report. Do not consider that you need to cover every chapter, everything in every chapter. You are telling a story. And what you want to do is make sure that everything that you have in this is it contributes to your core message, that you are not adding things in there like, oh, well, maybe I should mention compliance, or maybe I should mention continuous improvement. If it's not part of your core message, then don't do it. Make sure when you're doing this that you are you-focused, not I-focused. Now, some of you have some very compelling stories about yourselves, and that's perfectly fine, but make sure that the vast majority of what you are saying is addressed to the audience, not I did this and I did that and I did the other thing. What you want to talk about is that this is what you can do when you get back to your workplace. You want to make this extremely useful and extremely practical for the people who are in your audience. And you want to give them something that they can take back and use. In order to make it more concrete for these people that are in your audience, say you should do this because they're more likely to relate to it. Make sure that you craft a strong story. Here are a couple of ways that you can do it. There are many, but here are a few things that you might want to consider. And we'll go over each one of them separately. The first is from a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. The second is The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. And so let's start with the first one, with Start With Why. You can see there are 3 things that you should consider including in your presentation. Why, the purpose of your presentation, what is it that the audience wants to solve? So you start with that, then you talk about the how, the process. What are the best ways to solve it? And finally, you show the what, the results. You give them proof that what you are saying actually works. That is Start With Why. Now, Steve Jobs used Aristotle on persuasive arguments. He started with something that aroused the audience interest. Could be a startling fact, a statistic, something compelling, a question, something that is really grabs the audience's attention. Then he addressed what the problem was, provided the solution, which of course in Steve Jobs' case was some kind of Apple product, and then discussed what the benefits were for the audience if they accepted his solution, and finally had a call to action. So if you are going to be doing this for your presentation, you want to first grab the audience's attention, discuss what problem that they have that you can help them solve, then provide the solution, describe the benefits of doing this, the savings, the reduced impact on the environment and all of that, and then give them a call to action that they should then do this when they go back to their workplace. These are some ideas that you can consider incorporating from the book Made to Stick. Excellent book. Keep your story simple. Make sure you include things, especially in the beginning, that are unexpected. Make it concrete. That means tangible things that people can see, and can hear, and can experience. So make it concrete. Use credible sources. You can add emotion carefully, and make sure that it's all woven together in a story. So if you're going to tell a story, one of the things you might consider doing is storyboarding. This is an example of a problem-solving storyboard. You provide a little background, what the current conditions are, what the goals and targets, the analysis, proposed solutions there, the plan, and the follow-up. This is just one of many ways of telling the story. And remember, you're relating this story to the audience and what they can do. One of the nice things in PowerPoint is that when you can take a look in PowerPoint and see almost all of your slides at once. And that helps you visualize what the storyboard is so that you can create that and then revise it as you need to very easily. Once you've developed the storyboard, you have the basic framework of your presentation. So you have your overall concept, what it is that you're trying to get across, the problem definition, the approach, the findings, recommendation. That's another way that you can do this. Make sure, as you're practicing this, that you have transitions that take you from one slide to the next, so that you're telling a very smooth and fluid story as you're going through there. So, how do you need to show these? The first thing is lose the standard templates. If you use one, I'm going to tell you in our practice that you should not use a standard template. Everybody knows what they are. And remember, what you're trying to do is to show how skilled you are. And it doesn't show very much skill if you're using a standard template. So lose those and lose the bullets too. Remember what it said before that, PowerPoint has been disastrous. Well, one of the reasons is because of bullets. So unless you absolutely need a bullet, you can put, I'll say, bulleted items on there without necessarily having bullets and sub-bullets and all of that. You want to be fresh and innovative in the way that you show this. I always get asked, how many slides do I need to create? And what I always tell students is as many slides as you need in order to tell the story. By and large, there is a rule of thumb that you don't want to have a slide on the screen for more than 30 seconds without something happening. So if you have a 20-minute presentation, well, that's at least 40 slides or 40 images that you may use animation to make changes in the same slide, but there's still something happening as you are talking. So you're not like I am right now, just talking and talking and talking. One of the ways to help you do that is to make sure you have one and only one idea on each slide. Now you can have a couple of bullets without the bullet points there, but you are describing one idea on each slide. Whatever you're doing, show, don't tell wherever you can. Use visuals to the maximum extent possible. Presentation talks about something called signal to noise ratio. You take a look at what we have on the left. This is a cluttered slide. And you can see there's too much text. There are too many bullets. But this is what PowerPoint gives you as their default. They have a picture and they have bullets in a lot of their slides. But this is what Presentation Zen recommends. It's much more TED Talksy kind of presentation. It's clean and people can focus on the visual. Make sure you're using enough contrast. This top one is not something that is very easy to read. You can create a transparent colored overlay to help it be a little bit more legible, or you can blur the background in order to make sure that it's more legible. But you want to make sure, this is one of the common problems that students have, is that the slides don't have enough contrast in order to, and I've talked with some of you about this on your tables and graphs in your paper. So make sure when you're doing it for your presentation that every slide has sufficient contrast. Boy, have we ever changed over time. This on the left was a Microsoft slide by Bill Gates in 2005. The one on the right is the slide by Steve Jobs shortly before he died. And you can see what the difference is in the busyness and the elegance and the clarity of what's being presented. One of the ways that you can help people follow what you're saying is to guide the audience through your talk by leading the eye. You do this by animation, bringing in what you're talking about as you're talking about it. If you don't know how to do this with SmartArt, I'll be happy to show you. Animate so that you only have the information on the slide that you're discussing at the moment. But don't be too cute. So don't make it too slick or too busy with the animation. Mentioned earlier about having tables. Tables are good, but a lot of times if you want to show something like this, this shows what the entire water ratings are for a particular system, but it's too much. And it's hard to, again, people are going to try to read it instead of listening to you. So it's very important, but it's too small and it's too much. So when you're talking about it, you can snip a little bit of it and explode it out and just to talk about the parts that you are focused on. When you're doing charts, keep them as simple as possible. You take a look at the one on the left, it has a lot of unnecessary detail. You see pounds of, pounds of, pounds of, and you can just say paper, plastic, bottles, cans, and keep everything simple and make sure the x-axis shows what that particular item is. It's pounds. Wherever you can, you should use your own visuals. You've worked hard on them. They are precise and targeted at your particular project, and they add to your credibility. So use your own visuals. Use your own photographs. These happen to be photographs of a net impact instruction that they were doing. And don't use cliches. Those people who are already convinced already know all of the cliches, and those people who are not convinced are not going to be convinced by a cliche. This is an interesting technique. When you're putting or identifying having a photograph, and you can crop it so that you're only showing the part that is really key to the point that you're making, but don't center it. This is called the rule of thirds. And you want to put the item that you want them to focus on in one of these 4 circles. So you have it a little bit off-centered. It makes it more interesting. Fonts. No more than 2.5 fonts. That's maybe a font for the headline, a font for any text that you have on the slide, and then it can be, you might have something bold or something underlined or something italicized there. So bold or italic is half a font. You need to decide whether you're going to do a serif font or a sans serif font. For presentations, most of the time, you want to use a sans serif font. It's cleaner and it's easier to read. A serif font has all these little hooks on all of the edges of the letters and thick and thin parts to the stroke. Whereas the sans serif font is plain and everything is even. It is much easier to read. So don't use serif fonts. Use sans serif fonts wherever possible. You can pick an interesting font, but don't be too fancy or too cute because those fonts are hard to read. One of the niftiest things in the latest versions, couple of versions of PowerPoint, and it's definitely in Office 365 if you happen to have it, is this fun little item here on your home page that says design ideas. And if you click on design ideas, it will come out if you have a picture and a font or a text, a title. It will come out with all kinds of really interesting design ideas. These, because they haven't been around that long, are still pretty fresh. And again, don't get too cutesy because some of them are really kind of silly, but a lot of them are really sharp. So take a look and see what's recommending. And some of them even have wonderful photographs. Some of them are environmental photographs. Of course, we're in Florida, so mountains might not be useful, but they have a lot of very interesting things. And if you type your title in there, it will try to match its design idea to the title that you have. So if you put in sustainability, it'll come up with a light bulb. Of course, if you're not doing an energy audit, it might not be what you want. But the good thing is that you can take that particular design and just change out the photograph to a photograph that's more suitable for you. And this is an example of a design idea for a slide. They even have little videos. Kind of fun. Again, don't get too cute, but sometimes it's a very valid thing to do. This is what I was saying. You can type up powerful ideas and it'll come up with a slide that is reflective of that. So here's a powerful wave with powerful ideas. Or you can have it might come up with an icon that's a light bulb, that's an idea. And again, you don't have to use that particular light bulb icon, but you can replace it with a photograph of a light bulb. And you remember from our last classes that there are alternatives out there to PowerPoint. One of them is Prezi. And if you really liked Prezi and you feel comfortable with it, and then that is a compelling way to move someone through a story in an interesting fashion, then by all means, go ahead and use PowerPoint. So, who's done this? Let's show you a couple of examples of what students have done. Here's one on indoor water use, the big picture. What the student did was take a graphic and broke it up into its component parts and brought it up as she was talking about it. And her point was that 60% of the water use there was totally unknown. They knew what was used in the cooling towers and what was used in the manufacturing process. They had no idea what 60% of the water use was. That was an important point to make. She did a baseline comparison, comparing the lead baseline annual consumption with the companies, and then brought up the important information separately, zoomed it in, made it in a big font that was very legible, and led the eye through the points that she was trying to make. And what she was really trying to make was that they could reduce their water consumption by 25% if they wanted to be similar to the baseline annual consumption of similar buildings. This was another one that was very interesting. Yes, it's busy here, and people will tend to want to read it, which is probably what you're doing right now. So you want to immediately go in and focus in on what it is that you're discussing and point to the information that you want them to be looking at the moment. And they were able to show a 45% reduction, and they were able to recommend that that they could even get an exemplary performance point in lead if they did the recommendations. This was a nice one, happened to be showed the floor plan. And again, it's very busy. So what did the person do? He exploded the area and identified exactly where that leak was, made it very easy to see what he was talking about. Now, some of you have had to do simulations, and this is a good way to show the simulation over time, because usually you run the simulation and show how things are before and after, or in the process of the change. So here was one that this was a church where they had all the lights on all the time. And so she was showing that how much it costs for them to do that versus if they changed it so that they had the lights on when they were in the area. They ended up with time frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with a cost savings of 34%. And you see how she did that in a way so that it was big font, and the information that was most powerful was shown in a powerful way. This was kind of a fun one where they wanted to show expanding efforts over time and zero waste to landfill. So this was one time frame. Another group to explore, and essentially this is what they were trying to reduce. So to summarize, what we have talked about is the attention step. The attention is you. You need to be the focus of this. The problem, what too many do now. The solutions, what to say. And then the solutions, how to show it. And the benefits, using some examples. And so what I want you all to think about is, what will your next presentation look like? And your next presentation is the draft presentation that we will see in about a week. You'll have another week to work on it, and you will do a wonderful job on your final presentation, because everybody does. And I look forward to it. If you have any questions, please be sure to email me or talk to me over the next week as we're going over our chapters and get started. You have a little bit more than a week to get your presentations together. Have fun.